AI is that we have a silicon shortage now that will transition to a voltage transformer shortage in about a year. Ironically, transformers for transformers. You need transformers to run transformers.
Somebody has a sense of humor in this thing.
I think, yes.
Oh, man.
Fate loves irony. Ironic humor. And an ironically funny outcome seems to be often what fate wants.
Humor is all you need. I think spice is all you need. Somebody posted.
Yeah, but yeah, so we have a silicon shortage today. A voltage step down transformer shortage probably in about a year, and then just electricity shortages in general in about 2 years. I gave a speech for the sort of world gathering of utility companies, electricity companies. And I said, look, you really need to prepare for a tripling of electricity demand. Because all transport is going to go electric, with the ironic exception of rockets. And heating will also go electric. So energy usage right now is roughly 1/3, for very rough terms, 1/3 electricity, 1/3 transport, 1/3 heating. And so in order for everything to go sustainable, to go electric, you need to triple electricity output. So I encourage the utilities to build more power plants and also to probably have, well, not probably, they should definitely buy more batteries, because the grid currently is sized for real-time load, which is kind of crazy because, that means you got to size for whatever the peak electricity demand is, like the worst second or the worst day of the year, or you can have a brownout or a blackout. And we had that crazy blackout for several days in Austin. So because there's almost no buffering of energy in the grid. Like if you've got a hydro power plant, you can buffer energy, but otherwise it's all real time. So with batteries, you can produce energy at night and use it during the day, so you can buffer. So I expect that there will be very heavy usage of batteries in the future, because the peak to trough ratio for power plants is anywhere from 2 to 5. So it's like lowest point to highest point.
So like batteries are necessary to balance it out, but the demand, as you're saying, is going to grow.
Yeah,
and part of that is the compute.
Yes. I mean, electrification of transport and electric heating will be much bigger than AI, at least
in the short term.
But even for AI, you really have a growing demand for electricity for electric vehicles, and a growing demand for electricity to run the computers for AI. Mm-hmm. And so this is obviously going to lead to an electricity shortage.
How difficult is the problem of, in this particular case, maximizing the useful productivity per watt for training neural nets? Like, this seems to be really where the big problem we're facing that needs to be solved is how to use the power efficiently. Like, what you've learned so far about applying this physics, first principle reasoning in this domain, how difficult is this problem?
It will get solved. It's just a question of how long it takes to solve it. So at various points, there's a limit, some kind of limiting factor to progress. And with regard to AI, I'm saying like right now the limiting factor is silicon chips, and that we're gonna then have more chips than we can actually plug in and turn on, probably in about a year. The initial constraint being literally voltage step down transformers, because you've got power coming in at 300,000 volts, and it's got to step all the way down eventually to around 0.7 volts. So it's a very big amount of, the voltage step down is gigantic. So the industry is not used to rapid growth.
Okay, let's talk about the competition here. You've shown concern about Google and Microsoft with OpenAI developing AGI. How can you help ensure with XAI and Tesla AI work that it doesn't become a competitive race to AGI, but instead is a collaborative development of safe AGI?
Well, I mean, I've been pushing for some kind of regulatory oversight for a long time. I've been somewhat of a Cassandra on the subject for over a decade. I think we want to be very careful in how we develop AI. It's a great power, and with great power comes great responsibility. I think it would be wise for us to have at least an objective third party who can be like a referee that can go in and understand what the various leading players are doing with AI. And even if there's no enforcement ability, they can at least voice concerns publicly. Jeff Hinton, for example, left Google and he voiced strong concerns. But now he's not at Google anymore. So who's going to voice the concerns? So I think there's, Tesla gets a lot of regulatory oversight on the automotive front. I mean, we're subject to, I think, over 100 regulatory agencies domestically and internationally. It's a lot. You could fill this room with all the regulations that Tesla has to adhere to for automotive. Same is true for rockets and for currently the limiting factor for SpaceX for Starship launch is regulatory approval. The FAA has actually given their approval, but we're waiting for Fish and Wildlife to finish their analysis and give their approval. That's why I posted, I want to buy a fish license on, which also refers to the Monty Python sketch. Yeah. Like, why do you need a license for your fish? I don't know. According to the rules, I'm told you need some sort of fish license or something. We effectively need a fish license to launch a rocket. And I'm like, wait a second. How did the fish come into the picture?
Yeah.
I mean, some of the things like that I feel like are so absurd that I want to do like a comedy sketch and flash at the bottom, this is all real. This is actually what happened. One of the things that was a bit of a challenge at one point is that they were worried about a rocket hitting a shark. And the ocean is very big. And how often do you see sharks? Not that often, As a percentage of ocean surface area, sharks basically are zero. And so then we said, well, how will we calculate the probability of telling a shark? And then they're like, well, we can't give you that information because they're worried about shark fin hunters going and hunting sharks. And I said, well, how are we supposed to? We're on the horns of a dilemma then. Then they said, well, there's another part of Fish and Wildlife that can do this analysis. I'm like, well, why don't you give them the data? Like, we don't trust them. Like, excuse me? They're literally in your department. Yeah. And again, this is actually what happened. And then can you do an NDA or something? Eventually, they managed to solve the internal quandary, and indeed, the probability of us hitting a shark is essentially zero. Then there's another organization that I didn't realize existed until a few months ago that cares about whether we would potentially hit a whale in international waters. Now, again, you look at the surface of look at the Pacific and say, what percentage of the Pacific consists of whale? Like, he'll give you a big picture and like point out all the whales in this picture. I'm like, I don't see any whales. It's like basically 0%. And if our rocket does hit a whale, which is extremely unlikely beyond all belief, that is the fate had it. That whale has some seriously bad luck. It's like the least lucky whale ever. I
mean, this is quite absurd.
Yeah,
the bureaucracy of this, however it emerged.
Yes, well, I mean, one of the things that's pretty wild is for launching out of Vandenberg in California, they were worried about seal procreation, whether the seals would be dismayed by the sonic booms. Now, there have been a lot of rockets launched out of Vandenberg, and the seal population has steadily increased. So if anything, rocket booms are an aphrodisiac, based on the evidence, if you would correlate rocket launches with seal population. Nonetheless, we were forced to kidnap a seal, strap it to a board, put headphones on the seal and play sonic boom sounds to it to see if it would be distressed. This is an actual thing that happened. This is actually real. I have pictures.
I would love to see this. Yeah. There's a seal with headphones.
Yes, it's a seal with headphones strapped to a board. And like now the amazing part is how calm the seal was.
Yeah.
Because if I was a seal, I'd be like, this is the end. They're definitely going to eat me.
Yeah.
How will the seal, when a seal goes back to other, its seal friends, how's he going to explain that?
They're never going to believe him.
Never going to believe him. And that's why I'm like, well, it's sort of like, it's like getting kidnapped by aliens and getting an anal probe, You come back and say, I swear to God, I got kidnapped by aliens and they stuck an anal probe in my butt. And people are like, no, they didn't. That's ridiculous. His seal buddies are never going to believe him that he gets strapped to a board and they put headphones on his ears. And then let him go. Twice, by the way. We had to do it twice.
They let him go twice.
We had to capture
the same seal.
Well, no, different seal.
Oh, okay. Did you get a seal of approval?
Yeah, exactly. A seal of approval. No, I mean this is like I don't think the public is quite aware of the madness that goes on.
Yeah, it's absurd.
Frickin' seals with frickin'
headphones. I mean, it's a good encapsulation of the absurdity of human civilization. Seals and headphones.
Yes.
What are the pros and cons of open sourcing AI to you as another way to combat, a company running away with AGI?
In order to run, like really deep intelligence, you need a lot of compute. So it's not like, you can just fire up a PC in your basement and be running AGI, at least not yet. Grok was trained on 8,000 A100s running at peak efficiency. And Grok's going to get a lot better, by the way. We will be more than doubling our compute every couple months for the next several months.
There's a nice write-up of how it went from Grok 0 to Grok 1.
By Grok?
Yeah. Right, Grok just bragging, making shit up about itself.
Just Grok?
Yeah. It's like a weird AI dating site where it exaggerates about itself. No, there's a write-up of like where it stands now, the history of its development, and where it stands on some benchmarks compared to the state of the art GPT 3.5, and so I mean there's Llama. You can open source once it's trained. You can open source a model. Yeah. And for fine tuning and all that kind of stuff, like what to you is the pros and cons of that, of open sourcing based models?
I think there's some merit to open sourcing. I think perhaps with a slight time delay, I don't know, six months even. I think I'm generally in favor of open sourcing, like bias was open sourcing. I mean, it is a concern to me that, OpenAI, I was, I guess arguably the prime, prime mover behind OpenAI in the sense that it was created because of discussions that I had with Larry Page back when he and I were friends, and I'd stay at his house and talk to him about AI safety, and Larry did not care about AI safety, or at least at the time he didn't. And at one point he called me a speciesist for being pro-human. And I'm like, well, what team are you on, Larry? You're on Team Robot. To be clear. And I'm like, okay, so at the time, Google had acquired DeepMind. They had probably 2/3 of all AI research, probably 2/3 of all the AI researchers in the world. Mm-hmm. They had basically infinite money and compute. And the guy in charge, Larry Page, did not care about safety and even yelled at me, and called me a speciesist as being pro-human.
So I don't know if you notice about humans, they can change their mind, and maybe you and Larry Page can be friends once more.
I'd like to be friends with Larry again. he got really the breaking of the friendship was over OpenAI, and specifically, I think the key moment was recruiting Ilya Sutskever. So
I love Ilya. He's so brilliant.
Ilya's a good human, smart, good heart, and that was a tough recruiting battle. It was mostly Demis on one side and me on the other, both trying to recruit Ilya. And Ilya went back and forth. He's going to stay at Google, then he's going to leave, then he's going to stay, then he'll leave. And finally, he did agree to join OpenAI. That was one of the toughest recruiting battles we've ever had. But that was really the linchpin for OpenAI being successful. And I was, also instrumental in recruiting a number of other people. And I provided all of the funding in the beginning, over $40 million. And the name. The open in OpenAI is supposed to mean open source. And it was created as a non-profit open source, and now it is a closed source for maximum profit. Which I think is not good karma.
But like we talked about with war and leaders talking, I do hope that there's only a few folks working on this at the highest level. I do hope you reinvigorate friendships here.
Like I said, I'd like to be friends again with Larry. I haven't seen him in ages. And we were friends for a very long time. I met Larry Page before he got funding for Google. Or actually, I guess, before he got venture funding. I think he got the first 100K from, I think, Bechtel's or someone.
It's wild to think about all that happened. And you guys known each other that whole time. Just 20 years.
Yeah, since maybe 98 or something.
Yeah, it's crazy. Crazy how much has happened since then.
Yeah, 25 years. A lot has happened. It's insane.
But you're seeing the tension there, like maybe delayed open source.
Yeah. Like, what is the source that is open? You know what I mean? Like, there's basically, it's a giant CSV file. Yeah. With a bunch of numbers.
Yep.
What do you do with that giant file of numbers? How do you run? Like, the amount of actual, the lines of code is very small. Mm-hmm. And most of the work, the software work, is in the curation of the data. So it's like trying to figure out what data is separating good data from bad data. Like you can't just crawl the internet because there's a lot of junk out there. Mm-hmm. A huge percentage of websites have more noise than signal. Because they're just used for search engine optimization. They're literally just scam websites. So,
how do you, by the way, sorry to interrupt, separate the signal and noise on X? That's such a fascinating source of data. No offense to people posting on X, but sometimes there's a little bit of noise. So
yeah, I think the signal to noise could be greatly improved. I mean, really, all of the posts on the X platform should be AI recommended, meaning like we should populate a vector space around any given post, compare that to the vector space around any user, and match the two. Mm-hmm. Right now, there is a little bit of AI used for the recommended posts, but it's mostly heuristics. And if there's a reply, where the reply to a post could be much better than the original post, but it will, according to the current rules of the system, get almost no attention compared to a primary post.
Oh, so a lot of that, I got the sense, a lot of the X algorithm has been open source and been written up about, and it seems that there to be some machine learning. It's disparate, but there's some.
There's a little bit, but it needs to be entirely that. Like at least if you explicitly follow someone, that's one thing. But if you, in terms of what is recommended from people that you don't follow, that should all be AI.
I mean, it's a fascinating problem.
Yeah.
So there's several aspects of it that's fascinating. First, as the write-up goes, it first picks 1,500 tweets from a pool of hundreds of millions. First of all, that's fascinating because you have hundreds of millions of posts every single day, and it has to pick 1,500 from which it then does, obviously, people you follow, but then there's also like some kind of clustering it has to do to figure out what kind of human are you, what kind of new clusters might be relevant to you. people like you. This kind of problem is just fascinating because it has to then rank those 1,500 with some filtering,
Yeah.
and then recommend you just a handful. And to me, what's really fascinating is how fast it has to do that. So currently, that entire pipeline to go from several hundred million to a handful takes 220 seconds of CPU time, single CPU time.
Yeah.
And then it has to do that in like a second. So it has to be like super distributed in fascinating ways. Like there's just a lot of tweets.
There's a lot. There's a lot of stuff on the system. And I think right now it's not currently good at recommending things that from accounts you don't follow.
Yeah.
Or where there's more than one degree of separation. So, it's pretty good if there's at least like some commonality between someone you follow liked something, or reposted it or commented on it or something like that. But if there's no let's say somebody posts something really interesting, but you have no followers in common, you would not see it.
Interesting. And then, as you said, replies might not surface either.
Replies basically never get seen because they're currently, and I'm not saying it's correct, I'm saying it's incorrect. Replies have